So the AI is actually better if if you prompt it through the eyes of your persona.
Sure. Incredible. I mean, think of how transformational that is versus where we've been.
Hi, I'm Matt Egol, host of the CX and Culture Connection, the podcast for leaders looking to drive value by focusing on customer experience and culture together. I'm excited to talk today with Bill Tierney, VP of Customer Experience and Customer Analytics at Southwest Airlines. Bill has a long track record as a change agent and leader at transformation initiatives across multiple disciplines linked to CX, such as brand strategy, digital marketing, customer service, revenue management, and customer analytics. Thanks so much for joining today, Bill.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate it.
We're going to have a lot of fun. Just to get us rolling, one thing I saw in how you refer to yourself sometimes is as an expert on human chaos and turning that into long-term strategies. How does the way you approach collaborating with others contribute to a more customer-centric culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the chaos can probably come in many forms to begin with, right? It can come with business events, things that happen at work. It can come with the people that you lead, that you're responsible for. And then you may not know this about me, but I have 5 kids. So I have chaos at home all the time. And that may be my least successful domain. I'll just to be vulnerable and open about that. But, as far as being successful, for me, it's been a journey. It's something I've learned. I've had good leaders that I've learned from that space. And really, there's something I heard a few years ago internally. That was one of our leadership forums, and we had an outside speaker. And she was talking about, asking people, what's your point of view? Often that's part of building the relationship, understanding someone's point of view. But she said, instead of that, what she's learned to do is ask the question, where does your point of view come from? And it sounds subtle, but I've actually found that to be quite powerful to dig in and say, hey, whether you're working on an initiative or it's a performance issue or anything else, it's the best way of listening for me to understand, well, what's behind the point of view, because then I can better understand and align or shift or pivot. And I think that mentality of wanting to understand where people's perspective comes from is a big piece of building relationships. And just as an example, in customer experience, we work with the commercial team that's driving revenue. We work with the operations team. And so anytime we're assessing something, my team knows I want to know at least 3 things. How does it impact the business? How does it impact our employees? And how does it impact our customers? It's not good enough for us to want to have an initiative and not understand the impact to our employees and their day-to-day job. So, as you know, from all your work, it comes with a lot of listening and listening a certain way and really trying to understand and being open to change, I guess.
I really like the way you're picking this up in many ways. One is the need for a multidisciplinary perspective. And like customer experience or many business problems. I personally, I think that all things in value, like I talk about the path to value, it flows either through customer or employee or other stakeholders. But fundamentally, if you're going to create value as a business, you have to create either a better customer or employee experience, or probably both. Otherwise, you won't realize the value. And that requires a holistic perspective, because there are many different things in a company that can impact the customer experience. So tapping into those different perspectives of your employees really helps you get that holistic perspective.
Absolutely. I think, the service supply chain requires both. I'm a big believer. It requires both to be sustainable and do it really well. I'm also a believer that you can't have an exceptional customer experience that's sustained if it doesn't rest on an exceptional employee experience. And I think that starts inside out, top to bottom. It starts with the leadership. And I've been blessed to work at a company, Southwest, for over 20 years now, where we have had excellent people at the top, from the board, the CEO, leaders that I've worked for, people who, quietly demonstrate the capacity to put people first. And by that, I mean our current CEO I've known for a long time, and he's probably the best at writing. Well, he's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he does math faster than anyone else. I can tell you that. But he is exceptional at writing handwritten notes in a timely manner to a wide audience of people, and always kind of puts what's going on in your life first. This is someone who, during the pandemic, which, as you can imagine, was difficult for everyone. It was tough to be in the travel and hospitality industry at that time as well. And I remember being here, and his car was always the first one here, and it was there and I come in early and I leave late, and his car was here first, and it was there when I left late at night. And so I think the leaders set the tone. And of course, it's table stakes to be excellent at business, but to be excellent at fostering a culture of caring, and then to demonstrate it personally, that starts at the top down and inside out. And if you do that well, I think that sets the foundation then for how your frontline employees take care of customers every day, and how your folks who are setting policies think about it through the lens of the customer. So I couldn't agree more.
What you're highlighting, Bill, is what I really think of as the CX and culture connection. That the connection between customer experience is better if you have a culture that fosters the right behaviors in the organization. Culture is about behavior, ultimately, mindsets and behaviors. And if you have your employees show up in the right way with the right behaviors, that's what delivers a great customer experience. Or indirectly, the way you work on business problems with the right collaboration and things like that is also the way people show up. And it ultimately impacts the customer. The way you work on designing a website, launching a new product, fixing an operational problem, that's also about human behavior. It's more indirect. And what you're highlighting is, it flows from the top down, it amplifies and spreads energy in the organization. Those symbolic acts of your CEO impact and reinforce behavior.
I think it's a non-negotiable principle. It's tough to ask people to take care of others when they're not being taken care of. And probably an analogy you hear all too often, but one that resonates is, when we go over the flight briefing and you talk about the mask dropping and putting the mask on yourself before taking care of your young one there, that's the order of things. And our filter has always been employees, customers, shareholders. And if you work in that order, you'll have a successful business.
How does the focus on employee experience come into the work you do with customer experience? I find that a lot of times historically, people have focused on employee experience as something that has to do with HR, and they focus on hire to retire moments that matter. But actually, employee experience has a huge impact on customer experience. So how do you make it more of a direct connection?
Yeah, we could talk for hours about our employee experience from the day I walked in here in 2003. Everything. I started in our customer relations department, and everything is about emphasizing the importance of people, employees, and customers. And all three of those words actually are capitalized in how we write. Colleen Barrett, who was the heart and soul of this company, one of our founders, created almost her own writing style guide. And it was things like that that reinforced the importance of people, which is capitalized, customer, which is capitalized, employee, which is capitalized. And so it permeates the whole infrastructure, the whole curriculum. It's not just a program. It's literally the decisions we make, our values, the golden rule. We do what we say we're going to do. We follow through for employees. If we said we were going to do something, we do it. And so there's that sort of reinforcement internally here. And then on top of that, leadership that demonstrates servant leadership, I think, on a regular basis. Not to wander too long, but I like to tell this story because I had one of my leaders during the pandemic. My father passed away. He had been sick for a while, but passed away due to COVID. And it was February. It was, one of the spikes, unfortunately. And it was about 15 degrees in Boston. That's where I'm from. Well, I had my leader flew up that morning to go to the service. And it's not a short flight from Dallas. It's a good 4 hours. And then the airport, just to sit in the back because he wasn't allowed inside, to be there when I came out to catch a flight to fly back. And I'm proud to say that that's just one of many examples of people around here, not just leaders. I think the people around here, and we live in a world where there's a lot of KPIs. And my folks always ask me, what does success look like? And I figure, well, you get so much around metrics. So you want to know what success looks like at the end of the day, when you walk out to the parking lot, ask yourself one question. Were the people around you better off because you were there today? If the answer is yes, you had a good day. If not, come back in tomorrow and change it. But I think that is the mindset and the culture that permeates our employee base of 70, 75,000. And of course, do you get some bad apples that sneak in now and then? Yes. But when I travel across our 115, 120 stations, I always feel at home with our employees. And I know if I need something, they'll go out of the way, not because of my title or where I work or anything else, just because they're good people. And that is constantly reinforced when you hire good people, you set expectations, you train, and you need all that before you put in a formalized program. But we map out the employee experience just like we do the customer experience. And there are the parts that you would certainly take for granted, the hiring, the retiring, but the moments that matter. I mean, do you show up for people when they're celebrating something or when they're struggling with something? And you have to show up for both. Do the moments that matter to them matter to you? And that's not necessarily a program. Some of that is good leadership. But I want to say our team's done a fantastic job, as busy as we all get. We have these programs that give us reminders of what's going on in people's lives, some of those milestones. And, I've got some folks where if it's their birthday or anniversary, and I'll just send them a quick note. Sometimes you write a note, sometimes you write an email, but I'm always shocked at how meaningful it is to them. And those are just examples of, you have to have all that, I think, to have a truly sustainable customer experience over time.
Now, I've been trained over my career, focused on culture, and how, by the way, for myself, I came at this where I started in consulting, working on like quote unquote digital transformation. And I realized that to have impact on transformation, you had to focus on change management and culture and human behavior. And if you didn't pay a lot of attention to culture, you wouldn't be successful. So a lot of what you're talking about in your own role as a change agent and a driver of transformation is paying attention to people and culture and behavior. And otherwise, you're not going to have an impact and you're not going to collaborate very well. And I learned, how to be culturally sensitive in those efforts, that it's not enough to focus on shifting people's mindsets and getting them to buy into the need for change. You have to pay attention to the behaviors, and you have to actually systematically drive adoption of behavior, otherwise change doesn't happen. And what you were talking about a moment ago is the kind of paying attention to informal things, not just formal mechanisms. Handwritten notes, people self-reflecting, establishing norms in the organization, the mindsets of the people. Those are informal mechanisms. You can reinforce them through formal things like performance reviews or customer listening or performance metrics. These are more formal mechanisms. But I think too much of business anchors on the formal and doesn't actually pay enough attention to the informal. Startup companies naturally pay a lot of attention to the informal because they're smaller, they're more cohesive, and the founder tends to drive a lot of it. And what I hear a lot of at Southwest is the kind of founder ethos, the values really permeate the company and are lived day to day informally by everybody.
Yep, they're the expectations. And you highlight a key point. It's so much harder to do the formal work of change management without the relationships. As you were talking, I was thinking about, how many times it's an airline, right? We run into issues. Technology is not always perfect in this world, no matter where you work. And how many times our folks rally to the moment, whatever that is, whatever the crisis is, across our great departments, our technology department, our operations department, our commercial teams, they rally and they work together. And they know what to do, and they have established relationships, and they've been to each other's weddings, and they've been there through loss and those things, or the pandemic where immediately everyone went home. Well, success was built on the equity of relationships that had been built, and that those folks are they're all part of one team. It's not just some project that we're working on. And then on top of that, there is this customer obsession, right, that comes from it. And people here are religious about the customer. I mean, I've seen people come in from other companies and sometimes, well, why don't we do this? And they get sometimes a friendly but a very assertive reaction of like, well, that wouldn't be good for the customers. That's why we don't do that. And so, whenever we need to rally, to me, I always see two catalysts where people will work 24/7, and it's for the employees or for our customers. If there's a situation in the operation, I've had people work 20-hour days over and over and over again. And the mindset is we can't have our employees in this situation and we can't have our customers in this situation. We've got to figure it out. That's you can't quantify that.
What you're highlighting in culture is the importance of pride and energy. That if people feel proud, they're connected to the values, they feel a personal connection of it, and they want to leave that parking lot feeling proud of themselves. They're intrinsically motivated and they're mentalizing, they're thinking about how other people are feeling and how they can do better, how they can feel better about themselves. You've got a culture at Southwest that reinforces people's pride in delivering a great customer and employee experience, and that amplifies the energy as a renewable resource.
Well said. Very well said.
I'll give credit to that to Norman Wolfe, who I had a previous podcast episode with, and I did a book review for the Living Organization. He's a really interesting guy who talks about how basically all successful businesses are like living enterprises, living entities, and they have energy. And I connect with him because I think culture is a flow of energy, and it's emotion. Emotion amplifies energy. A good customer experience, the peaks in the journey, whether it's a customer journey or employee journey, or where the emotions are most meaningful and memorable.
And they can be little things. They don't always have to be big things. They can be little moments of just recognizing parents needing help with a kid, or I'll share something. Every week I read the open-ended comments, many of the open-ended comments that we receive in our customer feedback, and sometimes they just stop me in my tracks. And there was one last week, and it was one line, and the customer had given us a 10 out of 10. And it was last week, which was, there's been a lot of weather in the system for everybody, but all he said is, "Hey, you got me arriving at my destination in New York 20 minutes early. And that was the difference between me seeing my father alive or dead." And, just that reminder that everything we do matters, and it matters for people. And I sent that on to our operational leaders, and they're going to send it to the pilots. They don't know they made that difference today. But I'm always stunned that the people will take time to write in. That feedback truly is a gift. And of course you get complaints, but I'm always amazed at how many people take the time to write a compliment. And sometimes it's about a 3-hour delay they had, but how are people handled it? And one of the things you and I talk about and discuss in our forums is digital and human and technology and all those kinds of things. I can tell you this, I make a lot of business cases tied to capital investments or in-seat power in the plane or Wi-Fi and all these things that are important and become table stakes. There is no bigger driver in moving NPS than the human driver. And I tell our flight attendants that every time that I travel, because it is the most powerful driver at the end of the day. I've never seen such a force, no matter what, in what can move satisfaction. So it's a good thing to keep in mind as we talk about artificial intelligence and data aggregation and all those things. That at the end of the day, the human connection, at least from the math I see, is still the most powerful by far.
I'm going to dive in a moment more into the emotion and the human connection. But first, I want to encourage the audience, if you're interested in this type of discussion around culture, and I would encourage you to check out some of the past episodes from Norman, or I had a recent episode with David Friedman, who wrote Culture by Design. Check out the episodes at www.cxandcultureconnection.com, and definitely like and subscribe to the podcast so you get to see more great episodes with people like Bill and others. And thanks, Bill. So you're talking a moment ago about emotion and the human connection. And I'd like to share something to build on that, which is in the work that I do with clients. Often when we build out, a customer journey, we'll look for those peaks in the journey. And those peaks are where the emotions are strongest. So we'll actually look for, big moments as well as these new little moments that Bill talks about that matter, that can become hints about where big moments could be in the future, or just reinforce the values and behavior of your people to cumulatively have a great impact. But you want to understand the emotions you want explicitly. What emotions are you trying to deliver along the customer journey? And then you can actually evolve your customer listening to see whether those emotions are showing up. The AI is getting much better at this. You can actually look at whether the emotions are showing up and what behaviors your people are doing to create those emotions. And what I found quantitatively is that when the right emotions are present, there's an 80% fit with business outcomes. And the NPS, to Bill's point, is higher in those moments because the emotion's there, but the link to outcomes is because the emotion's there. That's what's driving the outcome.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And we look at that across the journey. There's always opportunity in how well you can capture and listen to it, and technology is advancing the capability to do that. But I think of that in terms of the journey, and you can think about this in your own experience for you or anyone listening. When you go to book a vacation, there's a certain euphoria and satisfaction of clicking the button and confirming it. It's real. It's become something that you have to look forward to. And so you sort of go through a research phase and you feel, an interest and curiosity and, hey, how can I put this, how can I make this happen? And then there's the joy of making it happen. Right. And there's probably a variety of emotions as you go through the whole journey, some including anxiety. I think when it comes to air travel, that's a big part of the job of customer experience is how do you remove friction and anxiety from the customer? It's as simple as that. And everyone knows that air travel can be stressful and airports can be stressful. So how do you make it as seamless as possible? Are you conscientious of people's time? How do you anticipate anxieties? I refer to one anxiety as bin anxiety. So for those of you who do not check your bags, though on Southwest, you can check 2 for free. We take the anxiety away there. But if you're carrying on, you notice this anytime you're traveling, regardless of carrier. Why would people rush to get into a tube to sit there for hours at 35,000 feet? What's the rush? What's the rush to get on there? In many cases, across all airlines, if they're carrying on a bag, they want to make sure that they can put it in the bin above them.
Guilty.
And then it doesn't get ejected.
Yeah.
Yeah, get all guilty, right?
Right.
And so I think that has been anxiety. And so what do you do? And that's part of the business case that we've made for having larger bins on board, which is one of the things we're doing is increasing the capacity by 50% and making sure, hey, we get to a point where don't worry about that. Focus on what you're doing right now at the airport. Get your meal, whatever it is, but don't be having this sort of stress that builds up and combusts in anticipation of, am I going to get this in the bin? If you look all throughout the journey in different scenarios, I think you run into that. When there's ambiguity in what's going on, how important is communication? Starting with recognition that something's going on. You may not have the answer, but acknowledge it. Show that you know that, whether that's through human announcements or digital updates, however you do it, and then inform. And I think it comes with, sort of a mindset of 2 things, advocacy for the customer and agency for the customer, and make sure the customer is as empowered as possible to control their destiny and change flights and make sure that you have the policies to do that. And then you have the digital experience to do that. But it's so powerful when you talk about emotions, because that's really the name of the game throughout the entire journey. And there's different emotions at different stages.
And if people want to learn more about how they can measure emotion and understand the emotion, one thing I can suggest to you is we have a diagnostic tool at my company JourneySpark that allows you to see which emotions matter in the customer journey, and then you can incorporate that into your customer listening efforts. So if you want to learn more about that, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Bill, you have a unique vantage point because, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, you touch both customer experience and analytics. So you clearly gone beyond chasing survey scores. You're leveraging customer listening to identify those opportunities, like reducing the anxiety you mentioned, right? How did you have a very multidisciplinary background. How did your personal journey evolve, and how do you get to this point where you're blending the emotion and the analytics?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the journey wasn't necessarily planned. My first goal was I wanted to work at Southwest Airlines. I love the company. And like many people who work here, made sacrifices to get in the door here and be here, whatever that was. I remember telling my wife, hey, I have all this vacation. I'm actually going to have zero as I start over at a new company, but it's a great company. And that's what I did. And I started in our customer relations department here at Southwest. And I'm very grateful for that because it was essentially ongoing research. You're talking with the customer live or writing to them or corresponding to them. And you're learning that we back our statements with policies and values. How do you deal with different scenarios and how do you take care of the customer? So I always think that that's where I learned the core curriculum. Without formalized research, you learn it through thousands of conversations and interactions. Well, this is what they really mean by that. This is what really upsets them at the end of the day or really makes them happy. And so I think I was dipped into the core curriculum of Southwest there. And then I went to revenue management and pricing. And the way I describe that to folks is, you're on a plane and you paid $250 and the person next to you paid $350. That was my job, where you're managing the pricing and inventory management. And there, I think I learned the core economics of the business is the way I describe it. You can't do that job without understanding route planning and the network, sort of the fundamentals of traffic and revenue of an airline. And from there, I moved into marketing in a traffic and revenue role. But instead of harnessing demand, it was more about driving demand. And I was blessed to have a long career in marketing in various disciplines, brands, nearly every discipline in marketing, and eventually lead the department. And then took on digital, and which was great as well because you learn the importance of little things at scale. I think when you're in digital, things that you may not have thought mattered that matter in a big way every day, and the technologies, of course, that go with it. And after that, I moved into the customer experience. And I tell you all that because I think in many ways I worked different parts of the journey, the customer journey, in different parts of my career. And it probably wasn't until taking over customer experience a few years back that I had an appreciation for the whole picture, though. The whole picture end to end, booking the baggage claim as we talk about it, and that whole spectrum that you're mentioning there. And analytics, I don't know if you're a fan of the strength finders, Clifton strength finders. I am, and it highlights your top strengths. We all have 34. They're all in a different order. Analytics is in my top 5. I don't consider myself very analytical. My boss and other people tell me otherwise, but I've always loved analytics. So yes, pairing the data and insights and the data science with the entire journey is really powerful. And it's really because you can set things up to listen better and make a difference in several different parts of the journey. So I'd say, you know this from going through a career, and you don't necessarily understand it at a young age, but every step means something. You're learning something. You're learning, you may have different leaders. You learn that way. You learn a different discipline, knowledge. You learn a different perspective and vantage point. So all those steps, I think, led to customer experience, which I'm obsessed with now.
What you're highlighting is your own unique progression as an individual is an opportunity always to build on and learn from what you had before in your own career and just explore new interests and continue to grow. And you've been able to take your past experiences and build on them and built a talent stack that's very diverse, but it's led you to where you are, and you're applying a very diverse set of skills that cumulatively fit together. They're coherent.
Yeah, which I probably didn't realize. My boss gave me the same speech when he asked me to take over customer experience, and I thank him for it.
I didn't know years ago that I was going to be a customer experience or culture guy. My interests just led me there. I started out in the media practice at Booz & Company when the internet was a puppy. So I was working on strategy consulting for companies getting disrupted by this thing called the internet, like magazines and television and, newspapers and theme parks. And I learned how digital was impacting experience, advertising, and content. I brought in riding the digital wave into like retail and consumer, and then later travel and hospitality, and then healthcare. And I brought into the number of industries being impacted because when they're getting disrupted and they're adopting digital, they have to change the way they work and their cultures. And that's the angle I was picking up. The change was from the culture and organization effectiveness and change side versus just the data and tech. But I had to learn the data and tech, how to apply it. So I wasn't an analytics guy, but all the industries I was in were heavily analytical. And then to apply and drive change, you had to harness data and analytics. So I'm like a mirror image of you, like similar interests, but we've got to a similar place because of the trends and the things we worked on. And, I really, your story resonates with me.
Yeah, the marketing, digital, and content, as you mentioned, talk about a transformation to being so data driven. And that just wasn't the case years ago.
Oh, absolutely. And the more data driven and analytical those industries get, I would argue the more the human side matters, because to be successful in working in these new ways, to become more agile, to become more experimentative, it's a culture shift to get these companies to run 30,000 experiments or 100,000 experiments a year. It's really hard for companies to do that. And being in a travel and hospitality business, you've learned the value of running lots and lots of small experiments to learn how to scale things.
It's a culture shift in many ways. To your point, as you talk about it, speaking of marketing and content, I'll just use an analogy that we can relate to. There was a day when you had planned campaigns for probably 6 to 12 months, right? And now we're gonna do all this studying, and here's what we think will work well, and then we're gonna launch it. And now in a few hours, you need to know if something's working because you're A/B testing it and switching it out.
I had recently on the podcast Nitin Sher, who's the CEO. He's a 4-time serial entrepreneur. His latest company, it's not new. It's the company's got a new offering, but it's been around for years. I first worked with them at PwC years ago when I was a partner there. But they have a company called Wevo, and I had Nitin on the podcast, and maybe you've used them. They started as a platform for user testing. So you could send either a marketing campaign or a website or a piece of content to a panel and get feedback. And what used to take 5 months or 5 weeks could be done in 5 days. Now with AI and simulation, you can do it in 5 minutes.
I had a meeting yesterday with our testing team, and we've been building this center of excellence and overhauling things, reorging a little bit, but just establishing the center of excellence. And one of the work streams is around testing, and the head of testing was talking about even moving from the testing to just an ongoing learning culture. People talk about, we want to do this test. Like, testing is always happening. It's just, what are your work streams for where the learning is taking place? So she's doing a fantastic job overhauling that, and it's headed exactly where you just said.
And, I'm going to bring it back to AI for a minute. What's really fascinating, and this is one of the things that Nitin and I were talking about in the podcast, and he and I have worked at some of my clients. I've leveraged the Wevo platform for some client work, where you can now look at the experience through the eyes of your personas using AI. You can have the AI adopt the eyes of your persona. And so we've used the Wevo platform to look at content through the eyes of personas that we've developed. And then you can use Gen AI to create content, and the human beings can iterate with it. And when we've then the whole point is to start driving more rapid iteration and testing, where your people learn to apply things. They're clue conscious. Your people apply things through the eyes of your personas, and the AI helps them simulate. And we've gotten a 50% lift in different metrics based on creating content that you then test an ad campaign or changes to website or changes to product launch. So the AI is actually better if you prompt it through the eyes of your persona.
Sure. Incredible. I mean, think of how transformational that is versus where we've been.
So what's most interesting, and where are you focused on in your role in analytics about how you apply AI?
So, I'll separate the two. AI, we actually have an AI organization that's helping foster that everything data governance throughout the entire company. So we work closely with them on AI, and then we've got sort of run the business analytics is the way I describe it, and change the business analytics, and more in change the business analytics and working with our AI team. I think it's all about, and you highlighted these examples, speed and scale. And, when I look at sort of the value, of course, everybody's using it, everybody's talking about it. My focus is more on, I think, servicing and supporting from booking to baggage claim. How can you assist the customer? And back to our principle of relieve the burden of our front line, or relieve the burden of our employees, and use your humans to work on more important things. And by more important things, I mean maybe more complicated issues that require a conversation. So an example of that, when you look at areas like our contact center, there's all kinds of inquiries that come in, but they're not equal. And many of which our customers want to be able to take care of on their own. It takes up valuable, important human time, and it increases costs if you continue to operate that way and hire to support it that way. I think the beauty of AI and servicing is it's sort of this trifecta of giving the customer what they want, driving efficiency where you need it, mitigating the costs of growth, and then also better equipping your employees. So if you can shave, average handle time for an employee by equipping that, it's beneficial to both the customer and the employee. The customer doesn't want to go through their whole litany of why they're calling and everything else and who they are and what the story is. If you can figure out a way to capture that and equip your employees with it, you can reduce average handle time, for example, on the calls, and can be more productive there, and everybody's happy at the end of the day. So I think you can use AI certainly at the most basic level, just from an efficiency standpoint, even by sort of farming out things for self-service, but then also by better equipping your employees. And the result there is you're using your employee base to deal with real issues. And those are usually situations where, not really deeper issues, more complicated issues. Those are usually situations where you have alignment in the customer experience. The customer and the employee both benefit from the conversation, want the conversation. But the only way you can sort of retain doing that at scale is making sure you're constantly pulling off the things that don't need that level of service. So I think, there's one example, but you highlighted them in content as well. Any kind of content production, whether that's on the sales side or service side, and the ability to test and optimize efficiencies through all of that.
I guess you've sparked a lot of great ideas for me, Bill. I really enjoyed our conversation. And in closing, do you have any advice for professionals who are growing in their career, where they can focus, things they can do to realize the impact and success people like you have had? Like what's your career advice for others that are aspiring to have an impact in CX and analytics and employee experience like you have?
Always be open to learning, and make sure whatever you're doing, you're passionate about. I recently read the book Unreasonable Hospitality. I don't know if you had a chance to read that. I got so excited about it and had my leadership team read it, and we had a discussion on it. And then I ran into their significant others at the holiday party, and multiple people mentioned how they appreciated me having their spouse or significant other read the book. And I think, at the end of the day, business is fun. That's complicated, and moving the needle is great. But there's nothing better than being part of a winning team and a group of people and seeing other people win. You know this. As you start in your career, there probably tends to be a little bit of a me focus in my career. And as you progress in your career, I think your perspective changes, and there's nothing like seeing other people have wins. Or I love a quote. I'll take a quote from a segment I had heard on Fred Rogers one time, which is, you run into a few people in your lives who know you can be better than you know you can be. And I think you always want to try to be that person for people. And if you do that, then the people around you will be better off because they're there. But learn and kind of approach life with that mentality, I would say.
That's great advice. And it gives you an opportunity to be more proud of yourself and more proud of your people around you and have an impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Bill. Again, I hope the audience has had a great time like I have, and definitely like and subscribe to the podcast, and really looking forward to continuing the conversation, Bill. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me on today. It's been a lot of fun.